In this video, we will discuss the monopoly market structure and investigate the behavior of firms that exist in this market structure. As you will remember, a monopoly is a market structure in which there is one seller, and that seller sells a product for which there are no close substitutes. But the key to what gives the monopolist the market power is the fact that there is a barrier to entry. The barrier to entry can be very legal, and it is perfectly acceptable. For example, a patent or a copyright can be granted to a monopolist, and those are legal barriers to entry. Another barrier to entry might be the fact that the monopolist simply owns the resources which are used to produce the product that is sold. Another barrier to entry is the existence of economies of scale, and these are in the case of natural monopolies. So a natural monopoly is simply where it's cheaper for one business to supply the market than to have competing firms supplying the same product. In the case of a monopoly, the firm is a price maker as opposed to a price taker in the case of perfect competition. The monopolist can set the price for the market, and this gives it great market power. However, the firm does want to maximize its profits. So, just like the case of perfect competition, the monopolist will maximize profits where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So, for example, the R&K Pharmaceutical Company has finally obtained approval to sell a new prescription which delivers sunblock protection in a pill form, and they have obtained a patent for this product. This allows it to have a barrier to entry. So the demand curve for the product is given below. We need to investigate where the firm will maximize its profit, what quantity will be sold, and what price will be charged. So we investigate that if the price is $13, only one unit is demanded. But if they lower the price to $12, 2 units are demanded, and so forth down the demand curve. So in the case of the monopolist, they will earn a different amount of revenue depending on how many units they sell. So we need to calculate the marginal revenue. So if they sell one product at $13 and 2 products, they get a total revenue of $24. They're $12 a piece. That means there is a marginal revenue of $11 for the second unit. The third unit adds an additional $9 in terms of total revenue. Just like with perfect competition, we also have to calculate marginal cost. So that's the difference in the cost as we go from one unit to the next. So when they sell one unit at $14 and 2 units, it costs them $18. The second unit added $4 in cost. The third unit only added $3 in cost, and the fourth unit added an additional $7. I also threw on there the average total cost column, which you will remember is simply the total cost divided by the quantity, and that provides average total cost. So the firm in the monopoly market structure is going to maximize its profits where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So that occurs at 4 units. Marginal revenue of 7 is equal to the marginal cost of 7. You'll notice that it costs $28 to make 4 units. Well, they're going to sell it for $10. The reason they sell it for $10 is because that's what people are willing to pay. So it's perfectly legal for them to do that. So they earn $40 in revenue. That means this firm will earn $12 of economic profit, and they can continue to earn this economic profit as long as the barrier to entry exists. Now, in the monopoly market structure, there is a unique case of price discrimination. Price discrimination is where the monopolist has the ability to charge individuals a price that they are willing to pay. and everyone is charged the price that reflects their unique elasticity of demand. So with perfect price discrimination, each person might actually be paying a different price depending on their unique elasticity of demand. The only way that price discrimination will work is that, number one, the sellers must be price makers. They have to be a monopolist that can set the price. And somehow they must be able to distinguish between consumers who are willing to pay different prices. They must be able to distinguish the different elasticities of demand. Also, the consumers cannot engage in arbitrage. Somehow, the firm has made it such that the buyer cannot simply buy the product at a low price and resell it to somebody else at a higher price. The monopolist is the only one that gains from the sale of these products. Arbitrage is the case where a buyer buys it at a low price and sells it at a higher price. If that were the case, then the consumer would be earning the profits. An example of price discrimination might be the case of business traveling on airlines versus leisure traveling on airlines. Now, buying an airline ticket isn't really an example of monopoly, but it is an example of price discrimination. And the way the airline can tell between the elasticities of demand has to do with how many days in advance the buyer purchases that airline ticket. For example, a business traveler may have a very inelastic demand because they need to get somewhere tomorrow, so they'll be willing to pay a higher price, versus the leisure traveler who might have many options to choose from and might have a great deal of time to investigate other options. They have a very elastic demand, so the airline will sell the ticket to them at lower prices because they're purchasing the ticket well in advance of the actual flight. The seller makes sure that the consumer cannot engage in arbitrage because the seller puts the name of the consumer on the airline ticket. So a person can't buy a whole lot of airline tickets at low prices and resell them at higher prices because their unique name is on the ticket. So in the case of a perfect price discriminating monopolist, we'll use this example. George has developed and patented a car that runs on water, and he faces this demand curve. He must determine where he will maximize his profit if he can perfectly price discriminate. So again, perfect price discrimination says, when the price is $20,000, there is one person who is willing to pay $20,000. So George will sell it to that person. If George lowers the price to $18,000, he can find another customer who's willing to pay $18,000. So now George has sold two cars. The first one sold for $20,000. The second one sold for $18,000. If he lowers the price to $16,000, he can capture another consumer, and so on down the list. You'll notice there's also a total cost column to produce this different quantities of cars. So we're going to calculate the marginal cost for each of these cars. So you'll notice one car costs $4,000. If George can sell that car for $20,000 to somebody, then George's going to make a profit. He's going to sell the first car. To make two cars costs $5,000. The second car only added $1,000 in cost, but George has located somebody who's willing to pay $18,000 for that car. So George ought to sell car number 2 because George will make some profit on car number 2. Car number 3 adds $5,000 in cost. However, George has found somebody who's willing to pay $16,000 for car number 3. So he should sell car number 3 also. And he should sell car number 4 because it costs an additional $8,000 to make car number 4. And George found somebody who was willing to pay $14,000. So George will make money on car number 4 also. Car number 5, George will only earn normal profit on car number 5 because car number 5 adds $12,000 in cost, and somebody is willing to pay $12,000 for car number 5. So George is actually going to stop producing that when the marginal cost is equal to the price of that product. So in this case, George will sell 5 cars. It makes no sense for George to sell the 6th car, because the 6th car adds $16,000 to the cost, and yet the 6th car can only be sold if he lowers the price to $10,000. So George would lose money on car number 6. So George will sell 5 cars. He will sell the first one at $20,000, the second one at $18,000, the third one at $16,000, the fourth one at $14,000, and the fifth one at $12,000. Again, this is perfectly acceptable because each of these people are willing to pay that price. So in terms of revenue, George will actually earn $80,000 in revenue. 20 plus 18 plus 16 plus 14 plus 12,000 means George will earn $80,000 in revenue. And it costs George $30,000 to make 5 cars. Therefore, George will earn $50,000 of economic profit if he can perfectly price discriminate. You'll notice from the graph that selling 5 cars is where the marginal cost curve intersects the demand curve. So where the marginal cost curve intersects the demand, it's equal to the price of the product, then that's the number of cars that will be sold. Again, George will sell the first car at $20,000, the second one at $18,000, and so on until the price is equal to the marginal cost. Just for a refresher, you might want to ask yourself, what if George were a single price monopolist, charging everybody exactly the same price? In this case, George will actually only sell 4 cars, and everybody will pay $14,000. That's where the marginal revenue equals marginal cost. You'll notice the total revenue column has been added to this chart because total revenue in this case is simply price times quantity. So if George was only a single price monopolist, George earns $38,000 in revenue, in economic profit, instead of the $50,000 in economic profit. So you'll see that if a firm can perfectly price discriminate, they will actually earn the most economic profit that is possible, and they will continue to earn that profit as long as the barrier to entry exists. So should we even allow monopolies? The reality is their prices will be higher than if the market structure was a competitive market structure, and the quantity tends to be lower than if there were competition. And the monopolist typically has the potential to earn higher levels of income. So people often ask, are there any good things that come out of a monopoly? And many people erroneously say that monopolies are illegal. But we've discovered that monopolies are not illegal. They actually are very legal. The barrier to entry could be a patent, an economy of scale, or ownership of resources. So what good things come from monopolies? Well, the reality is the barrier to entry actually may be the incentive for a new product to be invented. The firm has an incentive to create something new such that for a short period of time they might actually be able to earn economic profit off of their invention. So that's one possible good thing that comes from a monopoly. So we've discovered that monopolies are legal, they have barriers to entry, and they have only one firm in that market structure. They can either single price their product or they can price discriminate their product. If they are a single price monopolist, they will produce the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and the price will come from the demand curve. If they can perfectly price discriminate, then they will produce the quantity at which the marginal cost is equal to the price from the demand curve. In these cases, the firm will earn an economic profit as long as the barrier to entry exists.